Hey, you fabulous folks! Buckle up for a rollicking, reeking dive into the plague-ridden muck of the medieval world, where we're ripping the creepy bird mask off those so-called plague doctors. You've seen them in eerie sketches, strutting like grim ravens with a medical plan. Pure fiction. Being a plague doctor was like volunteering to wrestle the Black Death with a soggy twig, then dodging a mob chucking moldy turnips. So, grab your coziest blanket, flick on a fan for that gentle hum, and let's dive into a tale that's grim, gut-bustingly funny, and a tad unhinged. If you're feeling it, smack that like button, subscribe if you're bold, and drop a comment with where you're chilling and what time it is. It's wild seeing who's tuning in from London to the moon. Now, dim those lights, take a deep breath, and let's slog through the filth to learn why this job sucked worse than a rat in a pickle jar. Here's the raw truth. Nobody woke up thinking, I'd love to wear a sweaty mask and fight the plague for a bent coin. Plague doctors weren't heroes. They were the medieval world's misfits, failed bards, shady cobblers, or folks so broke they'd trade their teeth for a carrot. You didn't cure the plague, you waved a stick, spouted nonsense, and prayed the villagers didn't torch you for witchcraft. Our guy, Elias, is a plague doctor so lousy he once tried to banish a fever and set a cow's tail ablaze. Elias didn't choose this life. It mugged him when his coins and dreams ran dry. Tonight, we're following him through a chaotic gauntlet, fleeing angry mobs, peddling cursed tonics, and chasing a hope that doesn't reek of doom. It's a wild ride of fumbles, scams, and a sprinkle of magic to keep things weird. So, let's wade into the muck and see why this gig was the absolute pits. Elias slogged through the village's muddy lanes, his boots squelching like a soaked rag wrung dry. The beak mask strapped to his face, a leather nightmare stuffed with rosemary, mint, and what he swore was Crazy Clem's mouldy socks, wobbled with every step. Its glass eye holes fogged from his panting, blurring the world into a sweaty haze. The waxed cloak dragging behind him weighed as much as a sodden sack, and the stick jammed in his belt, his so-called wand, kept jabbing his ribs. At 29, Elias was no healer, no hero. He was a failed bard who dreamed of strumming ballads for swooning crowds, not smearing dubious goop on plague victims for a crust of bread. But dreams don't buy turnips, and the Black Death didn't care about his poetry. The village was a grim smear of thatched hovels and panic, its air thick with the tang of smoke and rot. Elias hadn't chosen this gig. It tackled him when his last coin vanished and a heckler smashed his lute for rhyming heart with cart. Plague doctors were the dregs of the trade. Failed scholars, dodgy cobblers, or chumps like Elias, so broke they'd take any job that didn't involve shoveling dung. His training came from Crazy Clem, a quack who taught him 3 rules: smell odd, talk bold, and scarper quick. Clem was now rotting in a ditch, likely pickled in his own elixir. Elias didn't miss him, but he envied the peace. He paused at a hovel, its straw roof sagging like a weary brow. Inside, old man Hubert lay on a pallet, coughing up something that looked like it belonged in a witch's cauldron. The stench hit Elias like a fist, sweat, decay, and a whiff of something unnervingly meaty. Hubert's wife, Agnes, hovered, wringing her hands until her knuckles popped. "Fix him, doctor!" she snapped, her voice sharp as a snapped twig. Elias adjusted his mask, the herbs inside failing spectacularly against the reek. "Easy, Hubert," he said, digging into his satchel for a jar of purple paste. His latest cure, a mix of crushed violets, lard, and something Clem swore was moon dust. It smelled like a betrayal. "This'll banish the fever," Elias lied, slathering the gunk on Hubert's chest. Hubert squinted, his beard twitching like a bristled brush. "Smells like my boots after a flood." Elias fumbled. "It's enchanted sludge. Draws out the bad humours." He had no clue what humours were. Nobody did. The plague mocked leeches, onion hats, and prayers to saints. Elias's job wasn't to heal, it was to look busy until the patient lived, died, or the villagers ran out of patience. Usually it was door number 3. A harsh shout sliced through the gloom. Leaning in the doorway was Bartle, a scrawny village boy with coal-black eyes and a grin like a broken gate. "Fraud! Fraud!" he jeered, tossing a pebble that pinged off Elias's mask. Elias glared through his foggy lenses. "Zip it, you little pest," Agnes gasped. "Don't curse my lad," Elias muttered. "If he's so clever, let him cure Hubert." Bartle smirked, as if plotting to spit in Elias's stew. Elias ignored him, dabbing more paste. Hubert groaned, his cough slowing, then stopped. Too quiet. Elias froze. "Hubert?" He poked the old man's shoulder. Nothing. Agnes leaned in, then unleashed a wail that could shatter a cauldron. "You've killed him! Murderer!" Elias's stomach lurched. No, he was already sick. But Agnes was beyond reason, shrieking, "Quack! Witch!" She grabbed a broom and swung, the bristles grazing his mask. Elias ducked, scrambling for the door. Outside, voices rose, neighbors catching the commotion. Torches flickered in the dusk, and a chant started, "Burn the quack! Burn the quack!" Elias bolted, his cloak snagging on the doorframe. He yanked it free, stumbling into the street. The mob was forming, a ragtag crew of farmers, weavers, and a butcher waving a cleaver like he meant business. "There he is!" shouted Bartle, hurling a turnip. It splattered against Elias's mask, juice dribbling into his eye hole. "Gah!" He swerved, dodging a cabbage and a suspiciously squishy apple. His boots slipped in the mud, sending him sprawling into a yard where Thomas and Ned, 2 drunken villagers, lounged by a cart. "Oi, quack!" Thomas slurred, shoving Elias. Ned grabbed at the wand, mistaking it for a cudgel, and yanked it free. "Get off!" Elias scrambled up, mask askew, as Moll, a wiry woman with a vendetta, joined the chase, swinging her own broom and bellowing, "Thief!" The mob's torches bobbed closer, their shouts now a mix of witch and thief. Elias had no idea what he'd stolen, unless it was their sanity. Plague doctors were perfect scapegoats. Nobody expected cures, but they loved a target when death came knocking. His cures hadn't killed Hubert, but they hadn't helped either. In this village, that was enough for a bonfire. He spotted a chapel, its wooden door ajar, and sprinted for it. A cabbage clipped his shoulder, but he dove inside, slamming the door. The mob's shouts faded, muffled by stone walls and the low moan of bells. Elias collapsed against a pew, panting, his mask steaming up. The chapel smelled of wax and mildew, a faint glow from candles flickering on an altar. He yanked off his mask, gulping air. His face was sweaty, his brown hair plastered to his forehead, his green eyes darting for pursuit. Being a plague doctor was a nightmare. You waded through filth, dodged death daily, and got paid in insults or mouldy bread. Elias hadn't signed up to save lives, he just wanted to eat. A memory flashed. A tavern in York. Elias strumming his lute, crooning a ballad about a knight and a maiden. He'd rhymed love with glove, thinking it clever. The crowd booed, a drunk lobbed a tankard, and the tavern keeper smashed his lute, shouting, "Stick to sweeping!" Elias fled, dodging creditors and his own shame. Plague doctoring was his last resort, the mask bought for a penny from a drunk who claimed it was blessed. It wasn't. It just made him look like a deranged fool. His thoughts drifted to his grand tales. A seaside garden with sage and lavender swaying under stars, waves whispering nearby. No plague, no mobs, just peace. He clutched that image, a shield against the chaos. His stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since yesterday's sad beat. He rummaged in his satchel, finding a stale crust and a vial of star water he'd meant to sell. He nibbled the crust, wincing at its grit. The yard fiasco deserved its own ballad, if Elias still wrote them. He'd skidded into the mud face first, Thomas and Ned treating him like a punching bag. Ned had yanked his wand, waving it like a trophy, while Thomas's shove sent Elias sprawling. Moll had made it worse, her broom smacking his back, tearing a strip of cloak he'd later find dangling from a fence. Bartle had darted through, shouting witchcraft and tossing pebbles, sparking the mob's cries. The boy was either a genius or a menace. Elias leaned toward menace. He tried to reason with the mob mid-chase, waving his wand and shouting, "I'm a doctor!" A turnip answered, smacking his shoulder. The butcher's cleaver had glinted too close for comfort, and Elias swore he'd heard someone yell, "He cursed my cart!" That was unfair. Setting a farmer's cart on fire had been an accident, a misjudged fever-banishing ritual involving a candle and too much ale. The cart was ruined, but the farmer's rage was worse. Elias had fled that village too, his reputation as a quack cemented. The chapel's quiet was a lie. It wouldn't last. Plague doctors didn't get breaks, just brief pauses before the next disaster. Elias's mask, now slung over his knee, reeked of sweat and herbs, a constant reminder of his lot. The leather was cracked, the straps frayed, and the herbs inside were less medicine, more prank. Miasma, the bad air everyone blamed for the plague, didn't care about rosemary or mint. Elias had no idea what caused the sickness. Nobody did. Some said God's wrath, others poisoned wells or comets. Elias just knew it killed fast and left him holding the bag. He'd seen it up close. Swollen buboes, blackening skin, victims coughing their souls out. Hubert wasn't his first failure, just the loudest. Last week, a girl named Meg had died under his care. Her mother sobbing as Elias mumbled about humours. He'd slunk away, dodging her father's fist. The week before, a baker named Tom had survived, but only because he was too stubborn to die. Tom later threw a loaf at Elias, claiming his toe tea cure had made him belch smoke. It hadn't, but Elias didn't argue. Plague doctors were punching bags, not heroes. His satchel held a rogue's gallery of scams. Leeches in a jar, a pouch of comet dust, really just ash, and a vial of fairy mist that smelled like fermented cabbage. None worked, but they sold. Villagers, desperate for hope, would trade a chicken or a coin for anything that sounded magical. Elias hated the lie, but he hated hunger more. His gran, a herb woman who'd known real remedies, would have boxed his ears for this. She taught him lavender for calm, chamomile for sleep, but never how to outrun a mob. The mob was why this job sucked most. Plague doctors were scapegoats, blamed for every death, every cough, every cart that went up in flames. Elias had been chased from 3 villages before this one, each time dodging torches, pitchforks, or once, a very angry baker's rolling pin. The baker had claimed Elias's star water made his bread taste like despair. It hadn't, but the rumour stuck. Being a plague doctor meant living one mistake from a bonfire, and Elias was a walking anthology of mistakes. He tried to stand, his cloak catching on the pew. A creak snapped him alert. The chapel door inched open, and a figure slipped in, Giles, the apothecary, with a grin like a mouldy lemon. "Well, well, Elias," Giles purred, his voice oily. "Hiding from your adoring fans." Elias scowled. "They want to roast me, Giles." Giles chuckled, twirling a vial of green liquid. "Need coin. Sell my new tonic. Pure magic banishes the plague." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Your last tonic made a man belch smoke." Giles shrugged. "Details. This one's different." "Split the profits?" Elias's belly rumbled louder than the mob's chants. He didn't trust Giles. Nobody did. But starvation was a great persuader. "Fine," he muttered. "But if this kills anyone, I'm blaming you." Giles's grin widened. "Deal." Elias tucked the vial into his satchel, ignoring the sinking feeling in his gut. Plague doctors didn't get to pick their poisons. They sold them and hoped for the best. He adjusted his mask, its leather creaking, and followed Giles into the night, the mob's torches still flickering. Bartle darted past, shouting, "Fool! Fool!" Elias swatted at the air. "Mind your own mischief!" But the boy's warning stuck, a prick of doubt. Giles's tonic was no cure. It was a curse, and Elias was about to stumble into a mess bigger than a tanner's vat. The village hadn't calmed when Elias stepped out. A torch flared nearby, and a shout, "He's here!" sent him running again. Moll was back, her broom swinging like a scythe. Elias tripped over a bucket, splashing himself with something that smelled worse than his mask. The mob, now a dozen strong, included a baker waving a rolling pin and Bartle hurling pebbles. Elias ducked a rock, his mask slipping sideways, and veered into an alley. It was a dead end, blocked by a cart piled with turnips. Of course, he spun, facing the mob. "I'm trying to help!" he shouted, waving his wand like it meant something. A cabbage answered, smacking his chest. The butcher's cleaver glinted and Elias's nerve broke. He climbed the cart, turnips rolling underfoot, and leapt over, landing in a pile of straw. Moll's broom clipped his ankle, and Bartle, circling nearby, yelled, "Run, dimwit!" Elias didn't need the advice. He sprinted, cloak flapping, until he reached a stream, where he collapsed, gasping. The stream's gurgle was the first kind sound he'd heard all night. He splashed water on his face, the mask dangling from his hand. The mob hadn't followed. Yet. Giles was gone, likely slinking to his next scheme. Elias pulled the tonic vial from his satchel, its green glow unsettling. He didn't trust it, but he didn't trust anything anymore. Plague doctoring was a trap. No cures, no respect, just a sweaty mask and a target on your back. He thought of the cart fire, a low point even for him. He'd been in a barn, waving a candle over a sick farmer, chanting nonsense about star alignment. The candle tipped, the cart caught, and the flames spread. Elias had doused it with a bucket of water, but the farmer's rage was unquenchable. He chased Elias with a pitchfork, shouting, "You cursed my livelihood!" The cart was ruined, but Elias's pride was worse. That story followed him like a bad smell, whispered in every village he fled. The stream bank was cold, the stars above indifferent. Elias's gran had loved stars, saying they held stories. He'd believed her once, back when he thought he'd write ballads that echoed under those stars. Now he wrote nothing, just lies about enchanted sludge and fairy mist. He tucked the tonic away, vowing to sell it quick and move on. Plague doctors didn't dream. They survived. A rustle in the bushes made him jump. Bartle leaned out, smirking. "Trouble, nitwit!" he jeered. Elias groaned. "What now?" The boy pointed toward the village. Torches flickered, closer. The mob was back. Elias sighed, donning his mask. Time to run again. Elias slumped by the stream, his beak mask dangling from one hand, its leather reeking of sweat and wilted mint like a prank gone sour. The night air bit his cheeks. The mob's torches faded to pinpricks, their chants of "burn the quack," now just a dull hum. But Elias knew better than to trust the quiet. Plague doctors got no sanctuary, just a gasp before the next flung turnip. His cloak, shredded from last night's turnip cart vault, clung to him like a soggy grudge. At 29, he was no healer, just a failed bard who'd swapped lute strings for a satchel of lies. The stars above sneered, uncaring of his growling stomach or the green tonic vial in his hand, its sickly glow promising either coin or a quick trip to a bonfire. Bartle, the scrawny village pest, leaned from the bushes, his coal-black eyes glinting with mischief. "Trouble, nitwit," he jeered, tossing a twig that bounced off Elias's boot. Elias groaned, swatting the air. "Shove off, you little goblin!" Bartle's smirk widened, but he darted back, pointing toward the village. Torches bobbed closer, the mob's murmurs sharpening. Elias sighed, yanking his mask on. Its straps pinched, the herbs inside mocking his nose. Giles, that slimy apothecary, had slipped him the tonic and vanished, leaving Elias to peddle it or starve. He tucked the vial into his satchel, next to the leeches and fairy mist that smelled like a tanner's mistake. Time to run. Again. He scrambled along the stream bank, boots slipping on slick stones, until the village faded behind a copse of gnarled oaks. The mob hadn't followed, likely distracted by a stray dog or their own bad ale. Elias's stomach whined louder than a cheated merchant. He'd eaten nothing but a gritty crust since yesterday's beat, and his last coin was a memory spent on a tankard that tasted like despair. Selling Giles's tonic was a rotten plan, but hunger made even curses look tasty. A new village, he decided, someplace fresh where his name wasn't yet a synonym for quack. He trudged north, the stream's gurgle his only guide, until dawn painted the sky a bruised purple. By mid-morning, Elias stumbled into Thornwick, a hamlet no cheerier than the last. Its cobbled square stank of fish and fear, hemmed by sagging stalls and hovels coughing smoke. Plague flags, ragged red scraps, flapped from doorways, marking the sick. Elias adjusted his mask, its glass eyeholes fogging as he swaggered into the market, wand in hand. Rule 1, talk bold. Good folk, he bellowed, voice muffled by leather. I, Dr. Elias, banish the plague with my enchanted elixir. A few heads turned. Wary fishwives, a one-eyed cooper, a gaggle of urchins led by a boy who looked suspiciously like Bartle. Had the pest followed him? Elias's gut twisted, but he pressed on, waving the green vial like a holy relic. The crowd parted for Maud, a tavern keeper with arms like ham hocks and a scowl that could curdle milk. Enchanted, eh? She rasped, folding her arms. Last doctor swore his paste cured my cousin. Now she's dead, and I'm out a hen. Elias swallowed, the mask hiding his sweat. This is different, good woman, brewed under stars blessed by saints. He had no idea which saints, but it sounded grand. Maud snorted. Prove it, beak face. The crowd murmured, eyes glinting with that mix of hope and bloodlust Elias knew too well. He needed a mark. Someone sick, but not too sick, to fake a miracle. Enter Widow Prynne, a gaunt zealot clutching a jar of her own murky cure, turnip juice and prayers by the smell. Step aside, fraud, she snapped, her voice a crow's rasp without the feathers. My tonic's God's own recipe. Elias bristled. Competition. Now? But the crowd was hooked, chanting for a showdown. Bartle or his doppelganger shoved through, shouting, Quack! Quack! Elias shot him a glare. Mind your manners, brat. Bartle grinned, tossing a pebble that pinged his mask. The little wretch had followed him, likely hitching a ride on a cart to torment him further. Fine, Elias declared, seizing the moment. A demonstration. Who's sick? A bony man, Jem, was shoved forward, coughing like he'd swallowed a bellows. His eyes were sunken, his skin grey. Not ideal, but Elias had no choice. Drink this, he said, pouring a drop of green tonic into Jem's trembling mouth. It'll purge the plague. Jem gagged, then blinked. I feel summit. The crowd gasped. Elias's heart leapt. Had Giles's brew actually worked? Then Jem's face turned puce, and he belched a cloud of green vapour that smelled like a swamp's revenge. The crowd screamed, Witchcraft! Maud grabbed a ladle, Widow Prynne waved her jar like a mace, and Bartle cackled, Fool's cure! Elias bolted, but the market was a maze of barrels and fishnets. He tripped over a crate, landing face first in a pile of codheads. The stench was a physical blow, and his mask skewed, one eye hole now framing his chin. Maud's ladle clonked his shoulder, and Prynne's jar sailed past, splattering turnip juice that burned like sin. "I'm helping!" Elias yelped, crawling through the muck. Bartle darted alongside, tossing pebbles and chanting, "Run, dimwit!" Elias swiped at him, missing as a fishwife's boot grazed his ribs. The mob was smaller than last night, but meaner, fueled by Jem's gaseous debacle. He scrambled to his feet, cloak catching on a stool. The fabric tore, exposing his patched breeches and a leg hairier than a monk's secret stash. A urchin shrieked, "He's no doctor, he's a beggar!" Elias yanked his cloak free, dignity in tatters, and sprinted for the square's edge. A drunken tanner, Watt, mistook him for a rival and swung a fist, clipping Elias's mask. It spun like a top, landing in a gutter. "My face!" Elias wailed, diving after it. Watt roared, "Thief!" and tackled him, both rolling into a cart of cabbages. The cart tipped, burying them in leafy chaos as the mob closed in. Amid the cabbage avalanche, a hand grabbed Elias's collar, yanking him free. It was Nell, a peddler with a face like weathered oak and eyes sharp as a blade. "Move, fool!" she hissed, dragging him behind a stall. The mob surged past, chasing Watt, who'd staggered up waving a cabbage like a flag. Elias panted, mask clutched to his chest. "Why help me?" Nell's lip curled. "You're no doctor, but you've got her scent, lavender and sage." Elias froze. His Gran's garden. "Who are you?" he stammered. Nell tossed him a pouch. "Find me in Wicklow. Ask for the herb woman." She vanished into the crowd, leaving Elias with a whiff of herbs and a pounding heart. The pouch held dried leaves. Chamomile, maybe, or something stronger. Elias's Gran had sworn by such remedies, not the sludge he peddled. Was Nell a fraud, or did she know real cures? His stomach growled, reminding him coin-trumped questions. He donned his mask, its straps now looser, and slunk to Thornwick's outskirts. The tonic had failed spectacularly, but he could still sell it to some desperate fool before Mordor Prynne caught him. Bartle was nowhere in sight. Small mercy, though. Elias swore he heard the brats laugh on the wind. Thornwick's plague flags fluttered, a reminder of the death he couldn't outrun. He'd seen it too often. Buboes like rotten fruit, skin blackening, families wailing. Jem might live, or he might not. Elias's tonic hadn't helped, but it hadn't killed him either. Yet. His Gran would have wept at his scams, her hands calloused from grinding real herbs. He clutched Nell's pouch, its weight a faint hope against the tonic's curse. Plague doctors didn't save lives. They sold lies and dodged fists. But Nell's words gnawed. "You've got her scent." He needed a plan. Thornwick was souring fast, and Maud's ladle wasn't forgiving. He could hawk the tonic in Wicklow, where Nell waited, but Giles's brew was a gamble. One more belching victim, and he'd be kindling. Or he could ditch the tonic, track Nell, and beg for her secrets. Both paths reeked of trouble, but starvation was closer. He trudged toward a crossroads, the sun dipping low, casting his shadow like a lanky spectre. His mask chafed, his wand was bent, and his breeches were one tear from public shame. Plague doctoring was a jest, and Elias was the punchline. A shout snapped him alert. Maud's voice, sharp as a flayed cod, echoed from the square. "There's the quack!" Torches flared and Bartle's pebble hit his back. "Run, Beak!" the boy crowed. Elias cursed, sprinting down a rutted path. Mole's broom wasn't here, but Maud's ladle and Prynne's zeal were worse. A tanner's dog barked. No menace, just noise. But Elias flinched, memories of last night's mob too fresh. He veered into a ditch, rolling into nettles that stung like a bishop's sermon. His cloak snagged, tearing further, and his satchel spilled, leeches, ash, and the tonic vial glowing like a bad omen. He grabbed the vial, its warmth unsettling. Giles's grin flashed in his mind. Oily, promising ruin. Elias's gran had warned of men like Giles, peddling poison for profit. Yet here he was, no better, selling fairy mist to widows. The mob's shouts grew louder, Maud's ladle glinting in the torchlight. Elias crawled from the ditch, mask skewed, and ran, the crossroads fading behind him. Wicklow was a day's walk, Nell a faint hope. Bartle's laughter chased him, the brat somehow keeping pace. "Fool's cure," he taunted. Elias didn't argue. He was a fool, and the plague didn't care. The path wound through brambles, the stars emerging like cold judges. Elias's gran had loved stars, weaving tales of heroes and herbs. He'd believed her once, dreaming of ballads that had outshined the night. Now he spun lies, his lute a broken memory. Nell's pouch was heavy in his hand, its herbs a whisper of something real. He didn't trust her, but he didn't trust himself either. Plague doctors survived, not dreamed. Yet as he ran, the tonic vial bumping his hip, Elias wondered if survival was just another scam. A torch flared ahead, a new mob, or stragglers from Thornwick. Elias dove behind a hedge, heart hammering. Bartle's voice was gone, but Maud's bellow carried, "I'll gut that quack!" Elias clutched the pouch and vial, torn between Nell's promise and Giles's curse. The plague was a reaper, the mob its blade, and Elias was just a bard who'd lost his song. Wicklow beckoned, but so did the bonfire. He adjusted his mask, its stench his only constant, and slipped into the dark, one step ahead of doom. Elias trudged into Wicklow at dusk, his boots squelching like a drowned rat's last gasp. The town was a festering boil. Huts sagged under mouldy thatch. Quarantine flags flapped like bloody rags, and the air reeked of sweat, smoke, and something unnervingly like burnt hope. His beak mask, cracked and stinking of wilted mint, hung from his belt, a grim reminder of plague tonic disasters. Hubert's death, Jem's green belch, and a dozen turnip-throwing mobs had taught him one thing. Plague scams were out. Smallpox, though, that was fresh meat. The pox was everywhere in Wicklow, its red pustules scarring faces and sparking panic. Elias, ever the opportunist, saw coin in fear. His satchel held Nell's herb pouch, its chamomile whiff a faint promise of salvation, or at least a better lie. At 29, he was no healer, just a failed bard with a knack for dodging hammers and a stomach growling louder than a cheated merchant. The tavern loomed ahead, its sign, a pox-scarred hog, creaking in the wind. The Pox and Swine, they called it, a name so on the nose Elias almost respected it. Inside, the din hit like a fist. Drunken roars, clinking mugs, and a fiddler sawing a tune that sounded like a cat's funeral. Candlelight flickered over scarred faces. Pilgrims, peddlers, and whores all nursing ale and sores. Elias adjusted his cloak, its hem shredded from Thornwick's cart vault, and swaggered in, mask off but wand in hand. Rule 1, talk bold. He needed a new con, something grander than Giles's cursed tonic. Nell's pouch, heavy with sage and mystery, was his ticket. No more quack doctor, he'd be a prophet, a pox-banishing saint with a silver tongue and a knack for trouble. He scanned the room, eyes catching Meg, the barmaid, whose curves and smirk could have sold sin to a monk. Her auburn hair spilled over a bodice, laced tight enough to make a sailor weep, and her green eyes glinted with mischief. Elias, ever a fool for a pretty face, saw opportunity. Coin, a meal, maybe a kiss if he played it right. He sidled to the bar, dodging a drunk who swayed like a ship in a squall. "Fair lady," he purred, leaning close, "your tavern's a haven, but I wager it's plagued by more than bad ale." Meg arched a brow, wiping a mug with a rag that looked older than God. "Plagued, eh? You're no night loot boy. Got a name or just a smell?" "Elias, prophet of the pox," he said, flashing a grin that hid his hunger. "I've a salve, blessed by stars, to banish smallpox and mend broken hearts." He dangled Nell's pouch, its herbs catching the candlelight. Meg snorted, but her eyes lingered on the pouch. "Prophet? You look like you've been wrestling pigs in a ditch. Prove it, or I'll toss you to Tor." She jerked her thumb at a hulking figure in the corner. A blacksmith, Tor, his face a pox-ravaged map of craters, his hammer resting like a sleeping dragon. Elias's gut twisted. Tor's arms were thicker than his dreams, and those eyes screamed, "I crush frauds for sport." Before he could charm Meg further, a pebble pinged his neck. Bartle, that scrawny menace, lounged by a barrel, coal-black eyes glinting like a rat's. "Oi, nitwit!" the boy jeered, tossing another pebble. "Still peddling farts in a bag?" Elias swatted the air, hissing, "Shove off, you tiny plague!" Bartle's grin widened, and Elias swore the brat had trailed him from Thornwick, hitching a cart to torment him. Had Nell sent him? No time to dwell. Meg was watching, and Tor's hammer twitched. Elias climbed a table, boots slipping on ale-slick wood, and raised the pouch like a holy relic. "Good folk!" he bellowed, voice cracking only slightly. "I, Elias Pox Prophet, wield heaven's own salve. No more sores, no more scars. Just coin for your cure." The crowd stirred. Drunks squinted, pilgrims clutched crosses, and a whore named Sal winked, muttering, "Cure my arse, pretty boy." Elias ignored her, shaking the pouch. This salve, kissed by angels, melts smallpox like snow in a forge. He had no clue what was in Nell's herbs. Chamomile, sage, maybe a dash of her cryptic nonsense, but it smelled divine, and that was half the con. A pilgrim, face pitted like a rotten apple, tossed a copper. "Try it on me," he slurred. Elias leapt down, heart racing. A mark. Perfect. He knelt by the pilgrim, a reedy man named Giles. No relation to the slimy Giles, thank the saints. Giles's face was a smallpox battlefield. Red pustules wept. Scars crisscrossed his cheeks. Elias opened the pouch, scooping a pinch of herbs into a tin of lard he'd swiped in Thornwick. "Easy, friend," he murmured, slathering the gunk on Giles's forehead. "This'll soothe your soul and your sores." The crowd leaned in, breath stinking of ale and desperation. Giles sighed, eyes fluttering. "Feels holy." Elias's grin widened. Maybe Nell's herbs were magic. Then Giles scratched, hard, his nails digging into pustules. "Itches!" he yelped, clawing faster. Elias froze. That's the sin leaving." He lied, but the crowd murmured, eyes narrowing. Bartle, perched on a stool, cackled, tossing a pebble that bounced off Elias's ear. "Quack! Quack!" Meg crossed her arms, smirking. "Some prophet. Tor, love, reckon he's a fraud." Tor rose, hammer in hand, his pox scars glowing like embers in the candlelight. "Cure my Meg," he growled, voice like gravel in a bucket. "Or I'll forge your bones into a spoon." Elias's knees wobbled. Meg, enjoying this far too much, sauntered over, her hip brushing Elias's arm. "Go on, prophet. Save me from the pox, or Tor's temper." Elias's mind raced. He couldn't back down. Tor's hammer was no metaphor, and Meg's coin was his only shot at supper. Nell's pouch was his lifeline, but Bartle's grin screamed sabotage. Had the brat tampered with it? No time to check. He scooped more herbs, mixing a fresh batch of salve with a prayer to whatever saint pitied frauds. "Meg, my muse," he said, voice dripping honey. "Your skin's too fine for sores. Let me anoint you." Meg chuckled, leaning close, her breath warm with ale. "Anoint away, but if I itch, you'll mulch." The crowd hooted, Sal yelling, "Anoint her ass, prophet!" Elias ignored the jeers, smearing salve on Meg's wrist. her pulse quick under his fingers. For a moment, it worked. Meg sighed, her smirk softening. Not bad, loot boy. The crowd clapped, coins clinking into Elias's satchel. Then Meg scratched. Hard. Her wrist reddened, not from pox, but something worse. What's this devilry? She snapped, clawing at her arm. Giles joined in, scratching like a man possessed, his sores oozing. The crowd erupted. Drunks roared, pilgrims wailed, and Sal hurled a mug that grazed Elias's ear. Bartle's laugh cut through the din, and Elias spotted him by the bar, sprinkling something into the herb pouch. Pepper, the little bastard. Ground pepper, turning Nell's salve into an itch bomb. Fraud! Tor bellowed, hammer raised. Elias ducked, scrambling under a table as Meg clawed her arm, cursing in ways that made Sal blush. The tavern became a scratching hell. Giles flailed, knocking over candles. Pilgrims raked their faces, toppling stools. Even Sal joined in, muttering, "Damn prophet cursed me." Elias crawled through spilled ale, his cloak snagging on a splinter. Bartle darted past, tossing pepper like a demonic flower girl. "Run, nitwit," he cackled, vanishing into the mob. Elias's stomach lurched. Tor's hammer smashed a table inches from his head, splintering wood like Elias's dignity. He bolted for the bar where Meg, still scratching, grabbed his collar. "Fix this, prophet, or I'll skin you." Elias fumbled for the pouch, praying Nell's herbs could undo Bartle's prank. "Easy, love," he stammered. "It's just a test of faith." Meg's glare could have melted iron, but she shoved him toward a shelf of jars. "Mix something, or Tor mixes you." Elias's hands shook, scooping untainted herbs. Sage, chamomile, a whiff of something sharper, maybe Nell's magic. He blended them with ale, not lard, whispering nonsense about holy dew. The crowd pressed in, scratching and shouting, Tor's hammer glinting like a guillotine. Then Nell appeared, slipping through the chaos like a shadow. Her weathered face, all sharp angles and oak-hard eyes, held a mix of scorn and pity. "You're a walking disaster, Bard," she muttered, snatching the pouch. She added a pinch of her own herbs, something green smelling of rain and secrets, and stirred the ale with a finger. "Smear this quick or you're kindling." Elias didn't argue. He grabbed the new salve, slathering it on Meg's wrist. The barmaid sighed, her scratching slowing. "Bloody hell, that's better." Giles, still flailing, got a dab on his cheek, and his clawing stopped, eyes wide. "Miracle!" he gasped. The crowd hushed, coins raining into Elias's satchel. Tor lowered his hammer, squinting. "You're not dead yet, prophet. But if Meg scars, I'll forge you into a piss pot." Elias nodded, sweat soaking his breeches. Nell tugged his arm, whispering, "The pox here's cursed. Old magic, monastery-born. Find the root there, or your scams are dust." She vanished into the crowd, leaving Elias with a tingling wrist where her fingers grazed. Cursed pox? Monastery. His head spun, but Meg's wink snapped him back. "Not bad, loot boy," she purred, slipping a copper into his hand, and a kiss on his cheek that burned hotter than Tor's forge. The tavern settled, drunks nursing ale instead of sores. Elias's satchel jingled, but Bartle's sabotage gnawed at him. The boy lounged by the door, tossing a pebble with a grin that screamed, "I'll ruin you again." Was he Nell's spy? A rival con? Or just a chaos gremlin? Elias didn't know, but he'd throttle the brat if Tor didn't get him first. He slipped out, dodging Sal's drunken grab. "Anoint me next, prophet," and Tor's glare. The night air hit like a slap, Wicklow streets dark with pox flags and whispers of curses. Nell's words echoed. Monastery, root, cursed pox. Elias's gran had warned of old magic, tales of herbs that bound spirits. Was Nell peddling truth or a grander con? He ducked into an alley, checking the pouch. Nell's herbs glowed faintly, a trick of the moonlight or something weirder. His stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since a Thornwick beat. The copper from Meg would buy bread, maybe ale if he haggled. But Tor's hammer loomed, and Bartle's pebbles were a promise of more trouble. Elias needed a plan. Hit the monastery, find Nell's root, or keep milking the prophet gig till his luck ran dry. Plague scams were dead. Smallpox was his game now, and Wicklow was just the start. A shout broke his thoughts. Tor's voice, roaring from the tavern. "Where's that prophet?" A hammer's clang echoed, and footsteps thudded. Elias cursed, yanking his cloak tight. Bartle's laugh rang out, closer than he liked. "Run, loot boy!" the boy taunted, a pebble skimming Elias's boot. He sprinted, alley walls blurring, the pouch bouncing against his hip. Wicklow's pox-ridden streets were no sanctuary. Tor's wrath, Nell's cryptic quest, and Bartle's mischief were a noose tightening. Elias, prophet of nothing but his own bad choices, ran into the dark, one scam ahead of doom. The alley spat Elias onto a cobbled square, Wicklow's heart pulsing with late-night debauchery. Torches flickered, casting shadows of drunks and dogs. His breath steamed, mask dangling like a guilty secret. Tor's roars faded, but Bartle's pebble hit his calf, sharp as a wasp. "Slow, nitwit!" the boy jeered, darting behind a cart. Elias spun, fists clenched. "I'll tan your hide, you pox-ridden gnat." Bartle's grin flashed, then vanished into the gloom. Elias's heart hammered. Had Nell sent the brat to keep him sharp or drive him mad? Either way, Bartle was a splinter he couldn't pull. He slumped against a wall, fishing out Meg's copper. It gleamed, a small victory in a night of near disasters. The tavern scam had worked. Barely. Nell's salve was no fraud, but her talk of cursed pox and monasteries reeked of trouble deeper than Tor's hammer. Elias's gran had spun tales of herb women binding diseases with roots, old magic that made priests sweat. Was Nell one of them, or just a better liar than him? His fingers traced the pouch, its herbs warm, almost alive. Smallpox was a gold mine, but a cursed pox could burn him worse than Thornwick's mobs. A whore's laugh snapped him alert. Sal, weaving through the square, spotted him. "Oi, prophet! Got salve for my aches?" Her wink was less seductive, more predatory. Elias forced a grin. "Only for sores, love. Try a priest for the rest." Sal cackled, staggering off, but her words lingered. Wicklow was hungry for cures, and Elias's prophet act could milk it dry if Tor didn't crush him first. He needed Meg's coin, not just her kiss. The barmaid's flirt was a door to more marks, but Tor's jealousy was a locked gate with a hammer-shaped key. He trudged toward a baker's stall, the copper buying a crust hard as sin. Nibbling it, he plotted. The monastery Nell mentioned was a day's walk, tucked in hills where monks hoarded secrets and ale. If her root was real, he could ditch scams for good, or sell it for a fortune. But Giles, that oily snake, was out there, peddling his own lies. Had he heard of the cursed pox? Elias's last run-in with Giles, back in Thornwick, had left him with a vial of green doom. The man was no prophet, just a leech with better boots. Footsteps crunched behind him. Elias spun, wand raised like a fool's scepter. Meg stood there, hands on hips, her bodice catching torchlight. "Skulking, prophet," she teased, voice low. "Tor's still fuming, but I reckon you're worth a wager." Elias's throat dried. "Wager? I'm no gambler, love, just a holy man." Meg stepped closer, her perfume cutting through Wicklow's stink. "Holy my arse. Get me more salve and I'll keep Tor off your neck. Maybe throw in a night you won't forget." Her finger traced his chest, and Elias's brain misfired. "Deal," he croaked, cursing his libido. Meg's laugh was a blade, sharp and dangerous. Monastery roads north. Don't die before I collect. She sauntered off, leaving Elias with a racing pulse and a sinking feeling. Meg was no mark. She was playing him, and Tor's hammer was her trump card. Bartle's pebble hit his shoulder, the boy's voice echoing from a rooftop. Fool's wager, Loot boy, Elias swore, clutching the pouch. Nell, Meg, Tor, Bartle, Wicklow was a trap, and he was the bait. He headed north, stars cold above. The tavern's chaos was a warning. Smallpox scams were volatile, and Nell's herbs were no game. His grand's voice whispered, sage for strength, chamomile for peace. But peace was a lie, and strength was for men who didn't run. Elias ran anyway, Wicklow's pox flags fading behind him. The monastery awaited, with roots, curses, and maybe a truth he didn't want. Bartle's laugh followed, a promise of more pebbles, more ruin. Elias, prophet of his own damnation, kept moving, one lie ahead of the hammer. Elias's boots chewed the muddy road to the monastery, dawn painting the hills a sickly yellow. Wicklow's din was gone, replaced by wind and the occasional caw of a crow that sounded like it was judging him. His satchel sagged. Nell's pouch, a stale crust, and a vial of Giles's tonic he hadn't dared sell again. The tavern scam had filled his pockets with coppers, but Tor's hammer and Bartle's pepper had nearly emptied his soul. Meg's kiss burned his cheek, a debt he'd pay in salve or blood. Nell's talk of accursed pox gnawed at him. Magic wasn't his game, but hunger was, and the monastery's route was his only lead. He paused at a stream, splashing his face. The mask, slung over his shoulder, reeked like a prank gone sour. Smallpox was no plague. It scarred, it killed, but it didn't blacken skin like Hubert's buboes. Yet Nell's curse hinted at something darker, a disease with a mind of its own. Elias wasn't a believer, but he'd seen enough, Jem's green belch, the pouch's glow, to doubt his doubts. His gran had taught him lavender for calm, but calm was for corpses, and he was still breathing. Barely. A pebble skimmed his ear. Bartle, perched on a rock, grinned like a demon with a toothache. Lost, nitwit, the boy taunted, tossing another stone. Elias lunged, missing by a mile. What's your game, brat? Nell's dog or just born to ruin me? Bartle's eyes flickered. Guilt maybe, or something sharper. Keep your salve, prophet. You'll need it when Tor finds you. He darted into the brush, leaving Elias fuming. Bartle wasn't just a pest, he was a puzzle, and Elias hated puzzles without coin. The monastery loomed by noon, a stone hulk squatting in a valley. Its spires clawed the sky, windows dark as a miser's heart. Red flags marked smallpox cases, but the air held a stranger stink. Incense, rot, and something Elias couldn't name. Nell's root was in there, maybe her truth too. Meg's wager, Tor's hammer, and Bartle's pebbles pushed him forward, but his gut screamed to run. Elias, prophet of nothing but bad bets, adjusted his cloak and stepped into the shadow of the monk's lair, ready for lies, roots, or ruin. Ever trusted a cure that bit you back? Elias muttered, as if the crows cared. Drop your tail in the dirt, mates, and pray it's not as bad as mine. The wind swallowed his words, but the monastery's gates creaked open and Elias walked in, one scam closer to salvation, or a hammer to the skull. Elias stumbled out of Wicklow's alleys, heart pounding like a debtor's drum. The Pox and Swine Tavern was a fading roar behind him, Tor's hammer-smashed tables and Meg's stolen kiss still burning his cheek. Bartle's pepper prank had turned Nell's herb salve into an itch bomb, sparking a scratching frenzy that nearly got Elias forged into a piss pot. His satchel, stuffed with coppers, Nell's glowing pouch and a cracked beak mask, bounced against his hip as he ducked into a shadowed square. Wicklow's smallpox panic hung thick, red pox flags flapping from hovels, the air sour with fear and pus. At 29, Elias was no prophet, just a failed bard with a knack for dodging death and a stomach whining louder than a cuckolded blacksmith. Tor's wrath was a noose, but Nell's talk of accursed pox and a monastery route was a lifeline, if he could avoid Bartle's next pebble. The square was a grim carnival. Drunks swayed, dogs gnawed bones, and whores hawked wares under torchlight. Elias's cloak, shredded from Thornwick's cart vault, barely hid his patched breeches, one tear from public shame. His profit scam had worked, barely milking coppers from pox-scarred tavern fools. But Bartle's sabotage and Tor's hammer demanded a new hustle. Smallpox was Wicklow's curse, scarring faces and souls, and Elias saw coin in its stigma. Nell's herbs, warm with sage and chamomile, were his edge. Not just a salve, but a balm for the damned, sold with holy flair. No more tavern brawls. He'd preach to the desperate, the outcasts, where Tor's hammer couldn't reach. A husky laugh cut through the din. Sal, the tavern whore, leaned against a cart, her pox-scarred cheek glowing in the torchlight. "Oi, prophet," she slurred, wine on her breath. "Got balm for my sins." Her wink was a blade, sharp and hungry. Elias forced a grin, hand on Nell's pouch. "Sins need priests, love. I cure sores, not souls." Sal cackled, staggering closer. "Cure my girls, then. Brothel's a pox hospice now. Clients won't touch scarred meat." Elias's ears pricked. A brothel hospice? Perfect. A den of desperate marks, too shunned for Tor to bother. "Lead on, Sal," he purred, dodging her grabby hand. "Your girls'll sing my praises." Sal's brothel, the Scarlet Veil, was a sagging hovel draped in faded velvet, its windows leaking candlelight and moans. Inside, the air was thick with rosewater, sweat, and smallpox's sour tang. Whores lounged on pallets, faces pitted like battlefields, some bandaged, others clawing at pustules. Clients were scarce, just a leering pilgrim and a drunk sailor, both pox-marked and reckless. Sal shoved Elias toward a corner, where a girl named Lila, barely 20, coughed into a rag, her eyes hollow. "Fix her," Sal snapped, "or I'll sell your balls to the apothecary." Elias swallowed, his prophet act teetering. Lila's sores wept, her skin a map of pain. This wasn't Meg's flirty wrist. This was real, and Elias was no healer. He climbed a crate, boots slipping on grime, and raised Nell's pouch like a saint's relic. Rule 1. Talk bold. "Sisters of the Veil," he boomed, voice muffled by rosewater fumes. "I, Elias Pox Prophet, bring a balm to cleanse your souls and sores. Blessed by stars, this'll make you shine like virgins." The whores stirred. Lila squinted, Sal smirked, and a scarred crone named Bess spat. "Virgins? I'd settle for not itching." Laughter rippled, bawdy and bitter, but coins clinked. Elias's heart raced. These women were no tavern drunks. They'd seen every con, yet their desperation was his gold. He knelt by Lila, scooping herbs into a tin of goose fat, the only base he had left. "Easy, lass," he murmured, smearing the balm on her arm. "This'll soothe your spirit." Lila's eyes fluttered, her cough softening. "Feels warm," she whispered. The whores gasped, Sal tossing a copper. Elias's grin hid his shock. Nell's herbs were no scam, but what was this cursed pox she'd mentioned? Before he could bask, a pebble pinged his neck. Bartle, that demonic urchin, lounged by the door, tossing fake relics, chicken bones painted gold. "By my charms, ladies," he chirped, winking at Elias. "Better than his muck." Elias's blood boiled. The brat had followed him, swapping pepper for bones to steal his marks. "Shove off, you tiny fraud," Elias hissed, but the whores swarmed Bartle, snatching relics. Lila scratched her arm, the balm's warmth fading. "It's back," she wailed, clawing sores. Bess joined in, raking her face, and Sal's glare could have melted steel. You cursed us, prophet! She roared, grabbing a candlestick. Elias ducked, the wax missile grazing his ear. Bartle's cackle echoed as he darted through the halls, tossing bones like a twisted saint. Fool's balm! He taunted, slipping into the crowd. Elias scrambled, his cloak snagging on a pallet, exposing breeches that screamed, beggar, not prophet. A shrill voice sliced the chaos. Sister Agnes, a gaunt nun with eyes like burning coals, stormed in, cross-raised like a war banner. Blasphemer! She screeched, pointing at Elias. Your balm's the devil's spittle! The whores froze, Sal dropping the candlestick. Agnes, a local zealot, ran a pox hospice across town, peddling prayers over cures. Elias's scam was her turf, and her sermons were sharper than Tor's hammer. Kneel, fraud! She barked, waving a vial of holy water. I'll exorcise your sin. Elias's knees wobbled. Exorcism. In a brothel. This was worse than pepper. Sister, I'm no devil, Elias stammered, clutching the pouch. This balm's blessed. Ask Lila. Lila, still scratching, moaned. It burned, then failed. Agnes's lips curled, a smile colder than a crypt. God sees your lies, Bard. Repent or burn. The whores, spooked, backed away, coins forgotten. Bartle, perched on a beam, tossed a bone that bounced off Agnes's cross. Exorcise him, sister, he crowed, sparking murmurs. Elias glared. Bartle wasn't just sabotaging, he was orchestrating. Was he Agnes's pawn, Nell's spy, or a chaos gremlin with a grudge? Meg burst in, auburn hair wild, bodice straining like a sailor's dream. Enough, Agnes, she snapped, hands on hips. Your prayers don't pay my girl's rent. Elias, fix this, or I'll let Tor hunt you. Her green eyes locked on his, half threat, half promise. Elias's throat dried. Meg's tavern clout reached even here, and her wager, Sal for safety, was his only shield. Right, love, he croaked, fumbling for the pouch. Let's cleanse these souls proper. Agnes scoffed, but Meg's glare silenced her. The whores, caught between fear and hope, watched as Elias mixed a new balm, praying Nell's herbs could outshine Bartle's bones and Agnes's cross. Nell slipped through the door, her weathered face a mask of scorn. You're a walking shipwreck, Bard, she muttered, snatching the pouch. She added a sprig of something sharp, mint maybe or her cryptic magic, and handed it back. Smear this and don't cock it up. The pox here's cursed monastery born. Find the root there or you're no prophet. Elias nodded, sweat soaking his robe. He slathered the balm on Lila's arm, her scratching slowing. God's teeth, it works, she gasped, sores drying. Bess, skeptical, took a dab, her clawing easing. The whores cheered, coins raining, but Agnes's shriek cut through. Witchcraft, she roared, splashing holy water that stung like sin. The brothel erupted. Sal swung her candlestick, missing Elias but toppling a lamp. Flames licked the velvet and whores screamed, scrambling for pallets. Bartle, still on his beam, tossed bones, chanting, "Burn the fraud!" Agnes charged, cross-aimed at Elias's skull. Meg grabbed her arm, snarling, "Not my prophet!" Elias dove under a table, balm tin clutched tight as holy water splashed his cloak, burning like cheap ale. Nell vanished in the smoke, her words, monastery, root, cursed pox, echoing. Lila, now calm, tossed him a copper, whispering, "Run, prophet." Elias didn't argue. He bolted, cloak catching on a splinter, breeches flashing to Sal's cackle. Outside, Wicklow streets were a maze of pox flags and torchlight. Elias sprinted, flames from the scarlet veil lighting the sky. Agnes's screams faded, but Bartle's pebble hit his back. The boy's laugh a dagger. "Slow, nitwit," Bartle taunted, darting alongside. Elias swiped, missing, his lungs burning. "What's your game, brat?" Nell's dog or Agnes's? Bartle's eyes flickered. Secrets, not just mischief. Keep your balm, Prophet. You'll need it at the monastery. He vanished into an alley, leaving Elias panting, coppers jingling, and Nell's pouch warm against his chest. He ducked into a doorway, catching his breath. The brothel scam had worked. Sort of. Nell's balm was no lie, but Agnes's exorcism and Bartle's relics had nearly cooked him. Meg's intervention was a lifeline, but her wager tied him to Tor's shadow. The cursed pox Nell spoke of wasn't just smallpox. It was deeper, older, like his grand's tales of herb women binding spirits. Elias's fingers traced the pouch, its herbs glowing faintly, a trick or a truth he couldn't dodge. His stomach growled. Meg's copper his only meal ticket. The monastery was north, a day's trudge, but Giles, that slimy leech, was out there, sniffing the same route. Had he heard of the curse? A husky voice broke his thoughts. Meg leaned against the wall, her silhouette all curves and danger. Skulking, Prophet? She teased, ale on her breath. Agnes'll have your head on a pike by dawn, and Tor's sniffing for you. Got my salve, or do I let him forge you into a chamber pot? Elias's pulse quickened, her bodice a distraction he couldn't afford. Salve's coming, love, he lied, patting the pouch. Just need a breather after your girls tried to roast me. Meg's laugh was a velvet blade, slicing his bravado. Breather? You're neck deep in pox and promises. I need balm for my clients, real balm, not Bartle's bone trick rubbish. Deliver, or I'll serve you to Tor with a side of ale. Elias swallowed, his prophet act fraying like his cloak. Meg's wager was no game. Her clout kept Tor at bay, but her clients, pox-scarred merchants and sailors, were his ticket to coin. Nell's herbs could deliver, but Bartle's sabotage and Agnes's zeal were torches to his kindling. Give me a night, he croaked, and I'll have balm to make your girls glow. Meg stepped closer, her perfume cutting through Wicklow's stink like a siren's call. A night, Prophet. Then you're mine. Or Tor's. Her finger grazed his jaw, sparking thoughts no prophet should entertain. She sauntered off, hips swaying, leaving Elias with a racing heart and a sinking gut. Meg was no mark. She was a chessboard, and he was a pawn with a lute. A pebble skimmed his ear. Bartle, perched on a crate, grinned like a gargoyle with a toothache. Fool's wager, nitwit, the boy taunted, tossing another stone. Elias lunged, missing by a yard. What's your angle, brat? Nell's spy. Agnes shelved me to a monastery. Agnes is pawn, or just born to ruin me. Bartle's eyes glinted, secrets sharper than his pebbles. Keep running, Prophet. You'll need more than balm when Tor catches you. He darted into the dark, leaving Elias fuming. Bartle wasn't just a pest. He was a puzzle, and Elias hated puzzles without coin. Was he Nell's eyes, watching his every flop, or Agnes's tool stirring holy wrath? The boy's relic scam, chicken bones painted gold, was too clever for a street rat, hinting at a bigger game. Elias needed a new hustle, fast. The brothel had burned his prophet cred, and Agnes's exorcism had marked him as a heretic. Tor's hammer and Meg's deadline loomed, but Nell's monastery clue was his only lead. Her herbs, glowing like a bad omen, could counter the cursed pox. If he could dodge Bartle and find the root. His grand's tales of herb women binding spirits echoed, but Elias wasn't a believer, just a bard who'd swapped ballads for scams. Smallpox was his game now, and Wicklow's outcasts were his flock. He slipped through the square, torchlight flickering on pox flags. A sign caught his eye. A crooked apothecary's den, its door carved with snakes and skulls. Perfect. A hideout to mix balm and dodge Tor. Inside, the air was thick with opium and rot, shelves sagging under jars of leeches and powdered bone. The apothecary, a wiry man named Silas, eyed Elias like a hawk sizing up a mouse. His face was pock-scarred, one eye milky, his grin all teeth and no mercy. "Lost, holy man," Silas rasped, twirling a vial of green sludge. Giles's tonic, the same cursed brew. Elias's gut twisted. Giles was here, or his shadow was, peddling poison, while Elias peddled hope. "Need a corner to mix balm," Elias said, voice steady. "Pox cure, blessed stuff." Silas's grin widened, predatory. "Blessed, eh? I sell relics, saints' teeth, virgins' tears. Trade your balm for a cut, or I tell Sister Agnes where you're hiding." Elias's blood ran cold. Silas was no apothecary. He was a con artist, a rival shark in Wicklow's pox-ridden waters. Bartle's bones had come from here, Elias bet, linking the boy to Silas's game. "Deal," Elias muttered, hating every word. Silas tossed him a jar of lard, smirking. "Mix fast, prophet. Agnes's flock sniffs close." Elias worked, blending Nell's herbs, sage, chamomile, that sharp mint Nell added, into the lard. The pouch glowed, warmer now, like a heartbeat. His grand's voice whispered, lavender for calm, sage for strength. But calm was a myth, and strength was for fools who didn't run. Silas watched, milking secrets. "Heard of a cursed pox," he said, casual as death. "Monastery's got a route to